Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another book video. Today's video is going to be my November reading wrap up, talking about all of the books that I read in November, which is a lot. Me and my kids were sick on and off pretty much the entire month of November, which is why my voice sounds like this. But also that means that I crushed books this month because we spent so much time sitting on the couch watching movies and I was just reading my little heart out on my Kindle. I read 21 books this month. I don't know if I've had a month with this many books this entire year. The last couple of months I've only read around like 8 to 10 books, so I had a really fun reading month this month. In my last reading wrap-up video, I shared my November TBR. I pretty much crushed the entire list. There's only 2 books on here that I don't have checked off. This month I wanted to read 1,000 Boy Kisses, but then I looked up the trigger warnings because I hate reading books about cancer. I knew that this one was sad, and so I wanted to know like what was sad about it, and cancer was like a big trigger warning, so I decided not to read that one. Maybe I'll read it later on, but like I hate reading about that in books, so I didn't do that. And then the other one on here that I haven't finished is Icebreaker, even though I've been reading it for like 2 weeks. I haven't finished it. I haven't wanted to pick it up, so yeah, we'll see if I finish that one or if I decide to DNF it. Okay, I'm going to my Goodreads so that I can see how I rated everything. I started the month off with some thrillers. The first one I read was The Perfect Marriage. I listened to this one as an audiobook, and this one I was actually really into for most of the book, but the ending was a trope that I hate so much in thriller books, which I don't want to give the trope away because it'll ruin the book for you if you haven't read it, but I just think that it like totally ruins a thriller when they do this, and that was like how they ended this one. This book is about a husband and wife. I think the husband is like a writer and the wife is a lawyer. She's an attorney, and her husband gets arrested for the murder of a girl, which then turns out that it was his mistress. So the wife basically finds out that her husband was cheating on her and had a mistress, and that also the mistress was like brutally murdered and that her husband is under arrest for it. She actually ends up being his attorney for the murder case. They are like trying to like figure out what happened because he is innocent. I will say that this was like a really interesting book to read. I was really interested to keep going. I like got through it pretty quickly, but like the ending just like totally ruined it for me. So I only gave this one a 2.5, but you might have different tastes in thrillers than me, so it still might be worth a shot if you want to try it. After that, I listened to another thriller, No Exit by Taylor Adams. This one had been on my TBR for a really long time. I was really excited to read this one, and it was really good. This was like one of the most suspenseful books I have read in a really long time. It had me on the edge of my seat the entire time. There was just like so much going on, and like I feel like I just had anxiety the entire time I was reading it. Apparently this was also recently made into a movie on Hulu also, but I haven't had a chance to watch that yet. This is about a girl who is like driving home from Boulder to I think like somewhere in Utah, but she's like rushing home from college because her mom is in the hospital, and so she's like trying to get to her mom, but it's in the middle of this like crazy snowstorm, and she ends up getting kind of like stranded at a rest stop because a bunch of roads are closed because of the snow. She's stuck at this rest stop with like 5 other people. They're all like just kind of like waiting for the storm to die down so that they can keep going, and at one point she's outside with her phone trying to get service so that she can send a text to her family, and while she's outside she like glances in the window of a car and she sees a kid in the car locked in a crate, and she's like, what the heck is happening? Why is there a kid locked in a cage in this car? So then she like goes back inside and she is like trying to figure out what to do because she wants to help this kid, but she doesn't know like whose car that is or like what the deal is. That's kind of the premise of the story, is that she's trying to like help this kid but also like not get hurt in the process, figure out like who of the other 4 people at this truck stop are like the one with a kid locked in a cage. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5. It was so suspenseful. It was so intense. The ending was really crazy. If you want a good thriller, I do recommend this one. It was pretty wild. After that one, I went into a Mafia binge. I've talked about this in like every wrap-up video that I have been like working through Sophie Lark's series and like all of her backlist. So I read 5 of her books in a row, which her books are really short. They're usually like really short and really easy to get through. So still, I read 5 in a row. All of her series pretty much interconnect, and they're like certain reading orders that you need to read them in order for them to make sense. So I've been getting through her Kingmaker series and her Underworld series. If you're not into Sophie Lark, sorry about the tangent I'm about to go on. First, I read Yvonne. This book was actually really fun. This is about Yvonne and I think her name is Sloane. Okay, so Yvonne is like the head of the Russian Bratva. The details are a little fuzzy for me, but he's like the head mafia boss. And Sloane is actually a contract killer. She is a assassin or whatever. And somebody has put a hit out on Yvonne and is paying Sloane to kill him. So she tries, but then he catches her before she can kill him and basically like takes her as a prisoner, and then they fall in love, obviously, as they do. I thought this one was really fun, really entertaining. The only thing I didn't like was that it was so short that you almost just like didn't get enough like detail and backstory, but I still really liked it. You see all of these characters come up in the other books and like Kingmakers and stuff too. So yeah, it's nice to like get to see these characters later on also. Overall, it was just pretty average. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5. And then after that, I read the next one in the Underworld series, which is called Snow. This one totally caught me off guard just by like how out of pocket it was, because this book was like not really very mafia. I mean, it was like a little, but usually Sophie Lark books, like one of the main characters is like pretty heavily like in the mafia, or yeah, like one or the other. But this book was about boxing, which I don't care about at all. And there was just so many details about boxing in this book. It's just like more details that you need later on also, but like reading it, I was not like excited to read about boxing. Although I still gave this one a 3 out of 5. It still was like a good, fun, entertaining read, but it's about the character Snow, who is a professional boxer, and he's like the best of the best. And he ends up falling in love with Sasha, who is indebted to the mafia. So she's being like forced to work as a doctor for the mafia because she's like paying off debts for her father. So like neither of them were in the mafia, but there was like underlying mafia stuff going on. Generally, this one, it wasn't my favorite. And I remember the whole time being like, why am I reading a book about boxing? But it was necessary to have things make sense in future books. So, you know, it is what it is. It's like homework reading, you know, prerequisites. Then I read the third book in the Underworld series, which is called Roman. This one I'm having like the most amount of trouble remembering what the hell this book was about. But I remember liking it, and my review on Goodreads says that I liked it more than I thought I would, but I can't remember anything about it. This was like a bully romance. Yeah, okay, Roman. He's like the head of the Bratva in Paris. I can't remember the girl's name, and it's not on the back of the book, but it's about him and a girl that he actually went to high school with, and he bullied her in high school. He was like so mean to her. All of high school, gave her like the hardest time, made her whole like youth years like really, really difficult. And then you like flash forward where he is like trying to take his mafia business legitimate in Paris, and he's like opening up a really fancy hotel and a casino and trying to like make all of his business legitimate and like step away from mafia stuff. But then the same girl that he bullied all through high school works at a newspaper. She's like a journalist, and she's assigned to do a story on him. And so they end up spending time together because she's like writing a piece on him. Obviously then she falls in love with this boy who is so mean to her whole life. Bully romance is definitely not my thing, and I think that's why I wrote in here that I liked it more than I thought I would. The writing was just like really good at like making you understand why this like guy was like acting like such an asshole. I don't know. I gave this one a 3 out of 5 also. After that, I got back over to the Kingmaker series and I read The Bully, which was a freaking another bully romance, and I actually really, really liked this one too. Not like the bullying part. I definitely don't like boys being mean to girls, like just doesn't do it for me. But this book was just really fun, like start to finish, like so much stuff happened. And I actually really hated like all of the smut in this book. It was just so not my thing. And I ended up having to like skim a lot of that. But the best part of this book was Dean's redemption story. He is like a total villain in the other books in this series, like leading up to this. And then this is the book where like you like love him again, and he like redeems himself, and like reading all of that, him like getting to know his family and like finally like making friends, and like his whole redemption story I loved reading about. I really liked that. It was really good though, and I remember crying at the ending. It was just like really, really sweet, and it ended on such a nice note. I really, really liked it. So I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5. And then after that, I read The Spy, which I think was originally supposed to be the last book in the Kingmaker series, but then she like went on and wrote another one after it was like over. Like this one had a really long epilogue at the end that really wrapped things up for like all of the characters in the series. So that's why I think it was like supposed to be the ending, but this one was really good. And there's like a consistent ongoing mystery that you're reading about through the entire series. So you're kind of like, what is that about? And it all comes to light in this last book. And I did not see it coming. I was pretty blindsided by like what happens. There was just a ton of twists and turns and like action going on in this one. Although I really didn't like buy into the love in this book, like the romance in this book was not really for me. I did not like the main character Nyx, and I just kept picturing her as Eep from The Croods. The way they described her in this book, it was like it was Eep from The Croods, and so that kind of like ruined it for me further. But I still really liked this one. It was very entertaining, and like I said, I loved the epilogue at the end, but I still just gave it a 3 out of 5. It was just, you know, nothing insane. But I got a little burnt out on Mafia books after that, so I haven't read any more from those series yet, but I will. After that, I read It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. I'm one of the people who did not need this book. This is the sequel to It Ends With Us. I thought that the ending of that book was so good, and I just didn't feel like I needed more, but also I had FOMO, and so I needed to know what happened, and I needed to just like, you know, see what all of the hype was about. I also feel like I need to put out there that the only reason that Colleen Hoover wrote this book was because her fans basically like begged for it. She said like multiple times that she was like never gonna write this book, but it was just like so demanded that like she just gave the people what they wanted and like wrote this happily ever after book for us. I feel like I get like defensive of her when I read the reviews for this book, and the reviews are so harsh. Like a lot of people really dislike this book and they like critique it so heavily, but I'm like, come on guys, like how can you be so mean about a book that she like didn't even want to write? Like she just did it for you. So I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads just because I appreciate that she wrote this book, because we all wanted it so bad. Not me, but you know, we. It's basically just a extended epilogue, like a happy ever after story for Lily and Atlas after the ending of the first book. It just follows their journey of finally getting to be together and like how they navigate that. She also sprinkled in just enough drama and just enough like other stuff to make it interesting to read still. Still, like my real life rating is probably just like a 3 out of 5. It was just like a very, you know, like average book. After that, I read Marriage for One by Ella Mays. This is about a girl named Rose who recently lost a family member who like left her a building in his will, but there was a stipulation in the will that she needed to be married in order to like receive it. A lawyer at the firm that this is all going through offers to marry her so that she can get her property, and his name is Jack. So their names are Jack and Rose, which is just so silly. I really enjoyed like the first half of this book. As like stupid and like unrealistic and cheesy as it was, like I really liked the first half of it. Like the smut in this book was just so bad, and it went on for so freaking long. It was just not the kind of smut that I like reading. It just felt so cringe, and like it really took over the book. And then by the end, the book was just like so dumb. I feel like it started off so strong, but I hated it by the end. It just really wasn't for me. Like something about it just really didn't work for me. I gave this one a 2 out of 5. After that, I read Heartless by Elsie Silver, which is the second book in her Chestnut Springs series. The first one, Flawless. Oh, I loved that book, so I was really excited to read this one, and it did not disappoint. I really liked this one too. This one is about Willa and Cade. Cade is a single dad of a 5-year-old boy, and he needs a nanny for the summer. He ends up hiring Willa, who showed up a little bit in the first book. He doesn't like really want to hire her, but he is kind of like backed into a corner and really needs help. So she ends up moving in with them and being the nanny for the summer, and Cade is like a really grumpy, closed off, angry, single dad type of thing. So it's definitely like the grumpy sunshine thing going on. I loved Willa's character. She was so funny. A lot of this book was just like super funny. The banter was really good. Like I really, really enjoyed her character. I usually don't love the big grumpy man who's just like closed off and angry. Like I'm just like so over that. So I didn't love that part, but Willa's character was so fun. It like definitely made up for it. And I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5. After that, I read read Scandalized by Ivy Owens, and this book was so fun. This was recommended on an Instagram page that I love following. It's called Beach Reads and Bubbly. I'll link it down below if you want to follow it too. This girl on Instagram, she's got great book recommendations and she's like super funny. She had posted about this book and like how it was one of her like favorite beach read after dark books this year. Ivy Owens also, that's a pen name for Lauren Billings, who is actually one half of Christina Lauren. So I knew that the writing was going to be good going into this one. This book was so fun though. This was kind of like a childhood friends to lovers. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to give anything away, but this is one that I like highly recommend that you add to your TBR because it was just really good and fun and really, really spicy, but like good spicy. Not like Marriage for One and like some of the other books I read, but definitely a lot of it. Like this is a pretty spicy book, but with like enough plot also. Basically it's about this girl, Georgia. She's also a journalist and she's in the airport in London on her way home to LA and her flight gets canceled. So she ends up at a hotel trying to book a room to stay for the night. And she recognizes a guy in front of her in line that she knew when she was a kid. It was the older brother of her best friend growing up, but they had moved away when they were like 12 years old or something, and she hadn't seen them since. So it had been like 15 years or something and she had not seen this guy since they moved away. And she was like, Alec, is that you? They get to talking. It's like their story, getting to know each other again. And then she finds out some like really crazy things about him. It was like silly, but also it was just like really fun to read about. I can't tell you what it is because I don't want to give anything away, but this was a really good, fun, smutty read. So if you're looking for something like that, I definitely recommend this one. Then I got into the After series. I'm so late to this and I wish I never did this to myself. But this month I read After and After We Collided. I feel like there's probably not very many people left who have not read these books, but let me just give you a little rundown about them. Also, I feel like I was blindsided by this because I had heard like a billion times that these were like Harry Styles fanfic. You guys know I love Harry Styles, and so I thought that I was gonna read a book about a girl with like Harry Styles, but it was just like a regular ass dude who was described to look like him. So that was a huge letdown. I was expecting it to be more like The Idea of You by Robin Lee, like that book that is about Harry Styles, but like this is not that. So I thought that that was disappointing. This series is basically about this girl named Tess who is a very kind of goody two shoes, like kind of stuck up, regular nerdy kind of girl who is like going to college. So like the very first book, you are going with her to college for the first time. She's got like a super dorky boyfriend who's still in high school and she is like going to college an hour away. And when she gets to college, her roommate at college is like super edgy and has tattoos and piercings and she's like vaping and cool, edgy, like bad college girl vibes basically. Whereas Tessa is like a huge freaking dork. The outfits that they were describing her wearing were so ugly. It was like hard to read about. They just made her like such an ugly, dorky person. So she's at college with her cool, edgy roommate, and one of her roommate's friends is Hardin, who is just like a big, mean, grumpy asshole of a guy. And they're like immediately drawn to each other, and it's basically just about their like rocky up and down relationship. There is a huge twist at the end that I can't believe I never knew that happened. So yeah, the twist caught me off guard. It was just so freaking bad. And it was so long. I can't remember how long the first book was, but I know it was over 500 pages long when like literally nothing happened except them just fighting like the whole time. It was so bad. But the ending was so wild that I like could not wait to read the next one. So I just immediately started the next one after I finished that one. This book was almost 700 pages long and nothing happened except them fighting. It's literally just this like 20-year-old couple fighting in a dorm room for 700 pages. Like I cannot believe that this book is as long as like an ACOTAR book. Okay, like A Court of Mist and Fury, it's probably about the same page length as this book. And so much fucking stuff happens in A Court of Mist and Fury, and literally nothing happened in this book. I cannot believe the audacity of these books to be this long and have absolutely nothing happen. They're so bad. It's like watching a train wreck and you can't look away. It's also kind of like trash TV where like it's so bad but you have to keep watching. Like, I don't know, I'm looking forward to reading the third book even though these are so freaking bad. I gave both of them 2 out of 5 because they are not good. After that, I read Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin. Oh my god, this book was so good. This book was so wild, such a journey. I loved it. It was crazy. I'm pretty sure this is set in like the 1700s. It's kind of got like Outlander vibes to it because it's in that time period, you know, but it's about pirates. Bennett Sharp, who is a girl pirate, she is the captain of her father's pirate ship, and she is a badass. She's on the run from her husband, her husband betrayed her, and so she has been like running away from him for like 2 years. But she's also like a notoriously wanted pirate because she's such a bad bee pirate that like everybody is trying to capture her. Finally, her husband finds her and is like trying to like win her back. But then she gets captured by a England Navy ship, and the man who captures her, Ashley, and her start to have this like captive-captor relationship thing, and then her husband gets back, and then it's so hard to describe because I feel like so much happened in this book. It was such a wild journey. I feel like it needs to have like a Netflix series made of it because it was just so good. Like a movie wouldn't even do it justice. It needs like 12 episodes for this one book. It was so good. It was definitely wild. It was very smutty. There was a lot of unexpected stuff going on. There was a lot of pirate action, a lot of stabbing and things. I rated this one 5 out of 5, which I think was my only 5-star rating this month. I really recommend this one, but like go into it knowing that it's going to be really intense. There's a big old surprise at the end. It was so wild. After that, I read The Devil You Know by Elizabeth Orr. This is the third in her Devil series, which I have raved about the first 2 books in the series. They were so good. And this one was really good too, but it was definitely my least favorite so far in the series. The 4th one actually just came out, so I'm gonna read that one this month. This one just didn't quite like do it for me like the first 2 did, but it was still really good. I gave it a 3 out of 5. I cannot remember the main character's name in this book, but it's about her and Ben, who is her coworker. They are both lawyers at this firm, and she is like really trying to make partner at their law firm. The trope is like enemies to lovers. They have a little bit of drama. I think like he ends up like accidentally stealing one of her like really big clients, and so she just hates this guy, but he is like pining for her that whole time. It was good, but I just didn't really like care about the characters at all, or like care about their romance. I didn't really like the main character of this book. She was just like not a very likable main character, so I think that kind of like ruined it a little bit. After that, I read Letters to the Lost. This is a YA book, and I hadn't read a YA in a little while. I love to just have like a nice, sweet, young adult book every now and then, you know? Just a good, fun, wholesome YA, and that's what this was. It was also a little sad and like pretty emotional. This is about Juliet and Declan, and Juliet has recently lost her mom and has been like leaving her mom letters on her grave at the cemetery, and Declan is doing community service. He mows the lawns at the cemetery, and he has some like big stuff that has like recently happened in his life too, so they're both just like sad hormonal teenagers going through hard times. But he ends up reading one of the letters that she left for her mom, and he like relates to the letter, and so he responds to it. He like writes back on the letter, and then they start writing back and forth to each other, not knowing who they are. It's like a pen pal romance, which I love. I have like a soft spot for that trope. I think it's nice. So yeah, they both go to high school together, and they're like writing back and forth to each other, but they don't know who the other one is. Overall, it was good. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. It was a really fast read. Like it was not very long. I read this one really quickly in like less than a day. After that, I read Off to the Races. Elsie Silver is the author of the Chestnut Springs series that I have been like really liking, and so I wanted to get into her backlist a little, and I had also heard really good things about this series, but it did not start off strong for me. I did not like this one. I only gave this one a 2 out of 5. It's probably not the book's fault that I didn't like it. It was just like nothing that interested me at all, which normally I can read books about stuff I don't care about, but like if the romance is good, like, you know, I don't care. But I didn't care about the main couple, and I didn't care about anything that was going on in the book at all. I'm gonna try to read the second one in the series and see if I like it, see if I want to keep going. But yeah, this one is about, I wish that they would put character names in the description. It would make it so much easier. Okay, I don't know his name, but the man character in this book, it's about him and his horse ranch, and he is like there trying to turn this horse ranch's reputation around. I don't care about horses. And he hires Billy, who is a horse trainer, to come in and train the horses so that they can win their little running races. It's Grumpy Sunshine. He's super grumpy, brooding, and she's like happy-go-lucky horse girl. It just didn't work for me. I just don't care about any of that. There was a lot of horse stuff in this book, a lot of ranch stuff. Like I don't know. I didn't connect with any of it. It was okay, but I just like, you know, I wouldn't read it again. After that, I read Hush Hush by Lucia Franco. And my God, did I hate this book. I feel so lied to about this book because I'm in a Facebook group, like a reading Facebook group. A bunch of people were talking about this book and how much they love it so much and they're so obsessed with this book. So in my head, I was like, this book is gonna be so good. And I hated it. And I also had to pay for this book because it wasn't on Kindle Unlimited or my library, so I had to buy it. That's probably why I didn't just DNF it, because I hated it pretty much from the beginning, but I read the whole thing anyway. Although by the end, I was like just absolutely skimming just to get it over with. This is about a girl named Aubrey who is in college and she lives with her best friend. She's working like a bunch of jobs, like barely scraping by, and her best friend like sees her struggling like all this time, and she's like, okay, I want you to come work with me where I work, like just keep an open mind. And it turns out that her best friend works at a very expensive, very high-end, secretive escort service. So she ends up starting to work for this escort service, and then she gets paired up with this man named James, and they just like have a like instant connection, even though he is like 55 and she is 21, I think. Immediately, the way that they described him in the book, the only thing I could see in my head was Buddy from Cake Boss. That like definitely ruined it, but it wouldn't have mattered anyway. I don't know. The main character of this book was so unlikable. She was like such an asshole because the whole time she also had a boyfriend who the boyfriend was like so damaged from his last ex-girlfriend who had cheated on him. And then here she is like stringing him along while she's like literally a prostitute. And he's like, please don't ever cheat on me. And she's like cheating on him every day. And then she's like carrying on this relationship with one of her clients. I hated it. Start to finish, I did not like anything about it. It was just not for me. I gave it a 1 out of 5 and I wish that I could give it less. After that, I listened to another thriller. I listened to Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This one, I did not know what it was about going into it. If I would have known, I probably wouldn't have picked it up, but I just kind of like picked it on a whim because I had seen it talked about a couple of times. This is about a mom who one night her like teenage son is coming home. She sees him outside her house like on his way home, and then another guy like comes up to her son and she's like watching through the window, and her son stabs this man and kills him right in their front yard. And she like goes out there and she's like, dude, what the frick? And then he gets arrested and taken to jail, and they're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? The next morning she wakes up and it's the day before. Like she traveled backwards in time, and she's like, dude, what the frick? The whole day she's so confused. And then the next day she wakes up and it's the day before that. And then she just keeps going backwards in time. So it's kind of got like a time loop trope to it where she's like reliving the same days over and over. And I just don't care for that at all. Books with like tropes like that, I don't care. I'm not interested in that. I just tried to read In a Holidays by Christina Lauren and realized that that was like the same kind of concept, and I DNF'd it because I was like, I just don't care about that. It was okay. The ending was actually really good. When all the twists happen and when it all kind of comes back together, it came back together really well. But the whole thing was just like a little bit boring and like pretty convoluted. I just don't care about reading about time loops like that. I gave this one a 2.5 out of 5. It wasn't for me. After that, I read Praise by Sarah Kate, which is the first book in the Salacious Players Club series. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about the books in the series, and I just wanted to like dip my toe and see. This book is a boyfriend's dad romance. So she finds out that her boyfriend cheated on her and they break up, and then she ends up meeting and working for her ex-boyfriend's dad, who is the owner of the Salacious Players Club, which is a sex club. I guess each of the books in this series kind of have a underlying kink to them. This one was all about kind of like a praise kink, as you can tell from the title, but it had like a lot of like dom sub kink going on in there too, which like I just don't care about. It's not for me, but it was still like interesting enough to read about, and like the romance was like okay, I guess. I still gave it a 3 out of 5. Why did I give it a 3 out of 5? I don't know. The last book I read this month was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And I actually listened to this one as an audiobook because she narrates her own book, her reading her own story. There were times in the audiobook where she cried or when she was getting choked up, and like you could just feel all of the emotions of the book through her while she was reading it. I highly recommend listening to it on audio. It was a relatively quick listen also, but yeah, it's just about her life story of having a very abusive mother and not really realizing it, and also just like going over her whole like career of being a child actor and a child singer and like everything that happened in her life. I loved iCarly growing up, so like hearing about all of the awful stuff that she was going through while also like being on that show and like playing this like funny happy-go-lucky character when she was actually having like such a horrible time. It was kind of like a mindfuck to read about. The whole thing was just really sad, and I just like broke my heart for her. And it was also just like really interesting to see a lot of like the behind the scenes stuff that goes on with like a show that you grew up watching. I don't rate memoirs, but I do think this book was really well written. She did a really good job writing it, and I loved listening to it. Yeah, it was just sad. It really hurt my heart for her, and it like really put that whole show and everything into like a different perspective. I definitely recommend that one. Listen to it on audio. This video is going to be so long. Those are all of the books that I read in November. If you have read any of the books that I talked about this month, leave your thoughts on them in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys think of all of these books, or if you have any books that you think I should add to my TBR, leave them in the comments. I know this is so long, but I want to just quickly show you my December TBR. I only have a few on here because I'm just feeling like a mood reading right now, but I really want to read Love Light Farms, which is the first in a series. It's supposed to be kind of like a holiday book. I also have 'Tis the Season for Revenge on here, which I'm reading right now, and I cannot put it down. I'm not finished, but so far so good. I also have A Merry Little Meet Cute on here, A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is the 4th ACOTAR book, and this one is supposed to be like a little bit holiday-ish, so I want to read that one this month. Regretting You by Colleen Hoover, A Photo Finish, which is the 2nd book in the Gold Rush Ranch series that I'm going to give a try. I also have the Holiday Swap on here. I hear that this one is cute. We'll see if I get to that. That one feels like a little cheesy Hallmarky for me, so I don't know if I'll be in the mood to read that, but we'll see. The Wives by Taryn Fisher. I'm actually listening to this one on audiobook right now, and so far it is so interesting. And then The Devil Gets His Due, which I was talking about earlier. That's the 4th in the Devil series. Those are the ones I have on my December TBR, and then whatever other ones I come up with. Okay, that's it. I've been talking for so long. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and subscribe, and I will see you guys all in my next video.